Hi, I'm Susie. I'm a sophomore at Glen Academy, and I'll be reading Learning About Dedication from the Life of Fredrick Douglass. Fighting Slavery. Fredrick Douglass was born Frederick Bailey, a slave in the United States, in 1817. To be a slave meant that you belonged to someone else. You worked from morning till night for no pay. You lived wherever your master, the person who owned you, decided, and you had to do whatever he or she wanted. As a slave, Fredrick had no freedom. Fredrick, like all slaves, knew that slavery was wrong. He dedicated his life to fighting the system of slavery. Slavery in the Americas. When Fredrick was born, slavery had been in North and South America for more than 200 years. European slave traders had made a business of capturing and buying people from Africa. Those slaves were then sold to people in North America, South America, and the Caribbean. On the trip across the ocean, slaves were treated like animals. They were given little food or water. Many died of hunger or disease. Many who did survive were sold to wealthy landowners in the southern United States. Growing up as a slave. When he was 6 years old, Fredrick was taken from his mother's shack to work in the master's house. He had to work very hard. He was often beaten. Fredrick and the other slave children in the house were fed only scraps of food. They wore rough cotton shirts. They were often hungry and cold in the winter. Fredrick was unhappy, but he was also very smart. He worked hard. He knew that he would one day fight for a better life for himself and other slaves. Learning to read. When he was 10, Fredrick was sold to another master in Baltimore, Maryland. The new master's wife was kind. She taught Fredrick to read, but that was against the law. People were afraid that if slaves knew how to read, they would learn about freedom. Then they would try to escape. When the master learned what his wife was doing, he was very angry. He did not allow his wife to continue teaching Fredrick, but Fredrick did not give up. He devoted himself to continuing his education. Anti-slavery movement. Fredrick secretly continued to read. He learned about people who wanted to end slavery. He heard of people who helped free slaves. He learned that many Americans agreed that slavery was wrong. He found out that some slaves had been set free by their masters. Other slaves were able to buy their freedom from their masters. Fredrick started thinking about how he could become free too. He knew that if he could get to one of the northern states, he would be free, but it would be a very dangerous journey. Standing up for himself. When Fredrick was a teenager, his master sold him to another master who owned a plantation. Even though he worked hard and well, Fredrick was often beaten. One day, Fredrick had had enough. When the master tried to beat him, Fredrick stood up for himself. He fought back. The master never beat him again. Escape from slavery. Freedom was always on Fredrick's mind. Once, he and a few other slaves planned to escape, but someone told the master their plan. Fredrick was caught and thrown in jail. Later, Fredrick was sent back to Baltimore to work as a slave in a shipyard. He met many free African Americans. He met Anna Murray, who later became his wife. With the help of Anna and others, Fredrick escaped. He went to New York City, where slavery was not allowed. He changed his name to Fredrick Douglass to avoid slave catchers. But Fredrick was free. His dedication had paid off. Speaking out. As soon as he was free, Fredrick began working to end slavery. He traveled to many cities in the U.S., England, and Ireland, giving speeches about the horrors of slavery. Slaves had no legal rights. They were not allowed to own anything of value. It was legal for their masters to beat, whip, or even kill their slaves. Fredrick started on an anti-slavery newspaper. He wrote powerful articles that said slavery should be stopped. He wrote a book about his life. He convinced many people that slavery should not be legal. The end of slavery. The southern states wanted to keep slavery. They were willing to separate from the north states to do it. The northern states believed that slavery should not be legal, and they were willing to fight to keep the country together. For that reason, in 1861, the Civil War began. The Union Army of the North fought the Confederate Army of the South. Fredrick helped set up the first African-American unit in the Union Army. The Civil War lasted 4 years. The North won the war. Slavery was outlawed, and the North and South remained one country, the United States of America. Dedication until the end. Although slavery had ended, African Americans were not treated as equals by many Americans. Fredrick dedicated his life to fighting for equal rights for African Americans. He wrote and spoke out against violence toward African Americans. Fredrick Douglass dreamed of all Americans living together in peace. He dedicated his life to this dream, and he never gave up. Fredrick Douglass died more than 100 years ago. He is remembered as a national hero.